The rain poured down, drenching the streets and everyone in it. People rushed past, trying to escape the storm, but one young waitress noticed a man struggling with his briefcase, slipping on the wet sidewalk. Without thinking, she ran to help him, soaking herself in the process. She didn't expect anything in return, but what happened the next day would change her life forever. Before we dive in, hit that like button and subscribe, because this is a story you won't want to miss, where a single act of kindness turns into something unforgettable. The rain had been falling for hours, drumming against the streets and turning the city into a blur of gray. Neon signs flickered through the haze, their colors reflecting off the wet asphalt. People scurried under umbrellas or dashed from doorway to doorway, but most of them were too absorbed in their own struggle to notice anything else. Among them was a young waitress, her dark skin glistening from the rain, hair plastered to her forehead, and apron damp from running in and out of the diner where she worked. Her name was Maya. She had been on her feet since dawn, and by the time the evening rush rolled around, exhaustion weighed down every movement. The tips she earned rarely made up for the long hours, and the restaurant's manager had a temper that seemed to sharpen with each passing day. She wiped her hands on her apron for the 100th time, preparing for another wave of customers. The sound of the rain outside was relentless, but she welcomed it. There was something soothing about the rhythm, even if it was drowning out everything else. As she balanced a tray loaded with steaming bowls of soup, her eyes caught a figure struggling on the slick sidewalk across the street. A man, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, was wrestling with his briefcase, his shoes slipping against the wet pavement. He looked completely out of place in the downpour, and the sight struck Maya in a way that made her pause mid-step. Without thinking, she set the tray down and dashed outside, water soaking her shoes and splashing onto her apron. "Sir, are you okay?" she called over the roar of the rain. The man looked up, startled, eyes wide as if he hadn't expected anyone to notice him. He tried to regain balance, but the briefcase slipped from his grasp, scattering papers across the puddles. Maya moved quickly, helping him gather the soaked documents and steady him. "Thank you. Really, thank you," he said, his voice tinged with genuine relief. "It's no problem," Maya replied, brushing water from her hair. "I just didn't want you to get hurt." She didn't ask for anything in return, and for a moment the world seemed to shrink down to just the two of them, standing in the rain-soaked street. The man's expression softened. "You're very kind. Not many people would stop for a stranger like this." Maya shrugged, a small smile breaking through her tiredness. "Sometimes people just need a little help." She didn't say it, but she knew what it was like to struggle alone. The city could be cruel, especially when you were barely making ends meet. They exchanged a few more words, brief but genuine, before the man finally straightened, thanked her again, and disappeared into the rainy night. Maya watched him go, a strange feeling of warmth settling in her chest. It was a small encounter, a momentary connection, but it left her heart lighter, even as the rain drenched her completely. The next morning, Maya returned to work, still exhausted but determined to push through the day. The diner was already bustling, the air thick with the smell of frying bacon and coffee. She moved with practiced efficiency, taking orders, refilling cups, and forcing a smile despite the dull ache in her legs. But today, the usual struggles of the job seemed magnified. Her manager, Mr. Caldwell, was in a particularly foul mood. He barked orders, criticized small mistakes, and hovered over her every move. "Maya, that order is late. How hard is it to keep up?" he snapped, gesturing to the steaming plates she was carrying. "I'm sorry, sir. I'll get it right away," she said, her voice steady despite the anxiety rising in her chest. She balanced the plates carefully, praying not to spill anything. But as if fate itself had decided to test her patience, a tray slipped from her grasp while turning a corner, sending a plate of food crashing to the floor. The kitchen fell silent for a heartbeat before Mr. Caldwell's voice cut through the air. "Maya, this is the last straw. I don't know why I keep you around if you can't handle basic orders." Her stomach twisted. She had been careful, diligent, and yet it seemed nothing she did was ever enough. Customers stared, some sympathetic, some annoyed, and she felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. Just when she thought she might collapse under the weight of humiliation, the door to the diner swung open, letting in a gust of cold, wet air. And then she saw him, the man from the rain. The same man whose papers she had rescued just the night before, standing there in a suit that now looked slightly rumpled, a small smile playing on his lips. He approached Mr. Caldwell calmly, his presence commanding attention without any effort. "Excuse me," he said, his voice polite but firm. "I believe you've been unfair to one of your best employees." The manager looked taken aback, clearly not used to being challenged, especially by someone who seemed so composed. Who are you?" he asked, suspicion in his eyes. "My name is Daniel," the man said, "and I think you should reconsider how you treat Maya." Maya felt her heart leap. She didn't know exactly what he planned to do, but just seeing a familiar, supportive face was enough to give her courage. Daniel turned to her briefly, giving a nod of encouragement, and she straightened, a flicker of hope replacing the anxiety that had gripped her. "You helped me last night," he said softly, almost to her, "and I never forget kindness." The tension in the diner shifted. Mr. Caldwell cleared his throat, unsure how to respond to the sudden intrusion and the subtle authority Daniel carried. Maya felt tears prick at her eyes, but this time they weren't from embarrassment. They were from relief, from the realization that her small act of selflessness hadn't gone unnoticed. Daniel's presence seemed to calm the storm, and while he didn't need to say more, his mere appearance had already begun to change the atmosphere. Customers whispered quietly among themselves, and Mr. Caldwell's rigid posture softened slightly, as if realizing that someone else was watching. Maya glanced at Daniel, unable to find words. The day, which had started so hopelessly, suddenly felt like it could hold something better. And in that instant, she understood a simple truth. Kindness, even in the smallest gestures, could ripple outward in ways you never expected. The morning's events had already left Maya shaken, but she forced herself to push through the rest of her shift. She moved carefully, determined not to make another mistake, and tried to focus on the rhythm of serving customers rather than the gnawing anxiety in her chest. Yet, no matter how hard she tried, the tension lingered. Mr. Caldwell's sharp eyes followed her every move, and even a minor slip of a coffee cup felt magnified under his scrutiny. By mid-afternoon, the diner was packed. The lunch rush had hit like a storm, and Maya was juggling trays, answering orders, and dodging bumping elbows from impatient customers. Her feet ached, and her arms were sore, but she barely noticed until the unavoidable happened. A large order came in for a table near the front, and as she carried the plates, a waiter from another section accidentally bumped her arm. A plate teetered, and despite her best effort, it crashed to the floor, spilling soup across the linoleum. A hush fell over the diner, and all eyes turned toward her. "Unbelievable," Mr. Caldwell barked, slamming his hand on the counter. "Maya, I've had enough of your carelessness. This is it. Either you get your act together, or you're out." Maya's stomach sank. She opened her mouth to explain, but the words felt hollow against the weight of the manager's anger. Customers stared, some awkwardly looking away, others clearly annoyed. She took a deep breath and forced a calm expression, hiding the panic rising inside her. "Please, sir," she said softly. "It was an accident. I'll clean it right up." "Accident or not, you need to learn responsibility," he snapped, turning to bark at another employee for no reason at all. Maya hurried to clean the mess, her hands shaking slightly as the hot liquid soaked through her gloves. She glanced at the door, wishing she could just disappear, wishing someone would notice that she worked tirelessly, even if it never seemed enough. And then, almost like a miracle, the diner bell rang, and the door swung open. The air carried the faint scent of rain, slightly sweet, and Maya's heart skipped a beat. There he was, Daniel. The same man from the night before, standing there with a calm, confident presence that seemed to slow the chaos around him. He didn't rush in, didn't demand attention. He simply walked toward the counter, his gaze settling on Maya. "Excuse me," he said politely, addressing Mr. Caldwell. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding here." Mr. Caldwell's face tightened. "And you are?" "My name is Daniel," he replied smoothly. "I met Maya last night in the rain. She helped me when I was struggling, and I can't help but notice how she's being treated here. I thought you might want to reconsider." The manager's jaw tightened, but there was something in Daniel's calm tone that made him pause. He was not used to being confronted with this kind of quiet authority, and the staff, along with the customers, watched in tense silence. Maya felt a mixture of relief and embarrassment. Relief because she finally had an ally, even if it was unexpected, and embarrassment because she hated being the center of attention, even for the right reasons. Daniel gave her a small, encouraging nod, and for a brief moment the chaos of the diner seemed to quiet. "I'm not here to lecture," Daniel continued, turning slightly to address the rest of the room. "I just believe that someone who shows genuine kindness deserves a chance to succeed, especially when they're doing their best under difficult circumstances." The words hung in the air, and the tension seemed to shift. Customers murmured quietly among themselves, and even Mr. Caldwell found himself at a loss. Maya noticed the slight twitch of his jaw, the way his posture softened, as if Daniel's presence had forced him to reconsider his usual harshness. You're letting her stay," one of the cooks muttered under his breath, incredulous. Well," Mr. Caldwell started, clearly struggling to maintain his authority. We'll see about that." Daniel's gaze returned to Maya. "Keep doing your best," he said gently. "And remember, sometimes the smallest acts of kindness are the ones that matter most." With that, he turned and walked toward the door, leaving a trail of curiosity and quiet admiration behind him. Maya felt her chest lift, a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying suddenly gone. She couldn't stop the smile that spread across her face. For the rest of the afternoon, something had changed. Mr. Caldwell, though still stern, watched her with a less critical eye. Orders were smoother, interactions less tense, and for the first time in a long time, Maya felt the small flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, things could improve. As the dinner crowd settled in, Maya reflected on the events of the past 24 hours. From helping a stranger in the rain to nearly losing her job, life had a way of surprising her, and she realized that the true measure of kindness wasn't always in grand gestures or rewards. It was in the courage to act, even when no one was watching. Later that evening, as the last customers left and the city outside glistened under the street lights, Maya wiped down the counters, her thoughts returning to Daniel. She didn't know if she would ever see him again, but she was grateful for his unexpected intervention. It had been a small act, just showing up at the right time, yet it had made all the difference. She paused at the door, looking out at the glistening streets. The rain had stopped, leaving puddles that reflected the glow of the neon signs. And for the first time in a long time, Maya felt like she could breathe freely, like the weight of constant struggle had lifted, even if just a little. The day had started with fear and frustration, but it ended with a quiet lesson. Kindness, no matter how small, always has a way of finding its way back. And sometimes, when you least expect it, life rewards you in ways that feel almost magical. Maya closed the diner behind her, her steps lighter than before. She didn't know what the future held, but she did know one thing: helping someone without expecting anything in return was worth every drop of rain, every sore muscle, and every moment of doubt. And somewhere in the city, a man who had been helped the night before walked away with the satisfaction of knowing that even a small gesture could change a life. And perhaps, in ways he had never imagined, change his own as well. The evening settled into a quiet rhythm. the last of the diners finishing their meals and the neon signs outside casting soft, colorful reflections on the wet sidewalks. Maya moved through the restaurant with a renewed sense of purpose. Each step no longer felt heavy with fear or doubt. Each tray she carried felt lighter, buoyed by the quiet reassurance of Daniel's earlier words. As she wiped down the counter for what felt like the 100th time that day, the bell above the door chimed again. She looked up, heart skipping a beat, and saw Daniel standing there once more. This time he wasn't alone. He had a folder tucked under his arm and a calm, determined expression on his face. "Maya," he said warmly, stepping inside. "I wanted to make sure everything is okay." Before she could respond, Mr. Caldwell cleared his throat. There was a hesitation in his posture that had never been there before. "Daniel, I don't understand," he began, but Daniel held up a hand, stopping him gently but firmly. "It's simple," Daniel said. "She's been doing her best under difficult circumstances, and she deserves recognition, not criticism. You may think she's careless, but I've seen her work. I've seen her kindness, and it's rare to find someone like that." Maya felt her chest tighten with emotion. She wanted to speak, to thank him, but words failed her. She simply nodded, her eyes wide with a mix of surprise and gratitude. Daniel turned to Mr. Caldwell again. "I'd like to suggest a compromise," he said. "Maya keeps her position, of course, and I'll personally ensure that any future concerns are addressed fairly. Sometimes businesses succeed not just because of profits, but because of people who bring heart to their work." The manager looked at him, then at Maya. For a moment, silence filled the diner. Then, slowly, Mr. Caldwell's shoulders relaxed. "All right," he muttered gruffly, though there was a hint of something softer in his voice. "Keep your job, Maya. But remember, I expect you to stay on top of things." Maya felt a rush of relief, almost like the city's rain had been washing away months of fear and stress. She couldn't stop the smile spreading across her face. "Thank you, sir," she said softly, and for the first time her words felt genuine, filled with hope rather than tension. Daniel glanced at her, his smile reassuring. "See," he said gently, "kindness comes back in ways we rarely expect." The diner's atmosphere shifted. Other employees looked at Maya differently now, respect and admiration subtly woven into their glances. Even a few customers who had stayed to witness the interaction offered encouraging smiles. Maya's heart swelled. The day, which had begun with frustration and fear, had transformed into a lesson in humanity she would never forget. Later, as the diner emptied and the city's lights reflected off puddles outside, Maya finally took a moment for herself. She leaned against the counter, exhausted but glowing with quiet pride. The incident with the spilled plate no longer felt like failure. It felt like a turning point. She had faced adversity, and with courage, and a little help from an unexpected ally, she had emerged stronger. Daniel lingered near the door, watching her with a gentle curiosity. "You know," he said quietly, "it's not every day that someone stops to help a stranger in the rain. That kind of heart, it doesn't go unnoticed. Not by me and not by the world, even if it feels like it does." Maya shook her head, laughing softly, a sound that felt like it had been missing for years. "I didn't expect anything in return," she admitted. "I was just trying to do the right thing." "And that's exactly why it mattered," Daniel replied. He paused, then added, "Sometimes it's the smallest actions that create the biggest impact." For a moment, they stood in quiet companionship, the hum of the diner around them like a comforting background note. Maya realized that the world wasn't always cruel, and that kindness, even when unnoticed, had a way of coming full circle. She felt a profound sense of gratitude, not just toward Daniel, but toward life itself. As she prepared to leave for the night, Mr. Caldwell approached her, a rare softness in his usually stern eyes. "Maya, Good work today. Keep it up. It was a small gesture, but to Maya, it felt monumental. Recognition from someone who had seemed impossible to please was proof that her efforts mattered, that perseverance and kindness were worth more than temporary setbacks. Outside, the city was calm. The rain had stopped entirely, leaving the streets glistening under the glow of the streetlights. Maya walked slowly, savoring the cool air and the feeling of relief that had settled over her. She thought about the night before, about how a single choice, to help a stranger, to show empathy without expectation, had led to something she could never have imagined. And somewhere, not far away, Daniel was walking too, thinking of the small acts of courage he had witnessed. A gesture that seemed minor at the time had created a ripple effect, touching lives in ways neither of them could fully comprehend. The world, it seemed, was quietly rewarding those who dared to be kind. Maya paused at the corner, glancing back at the diner, her heart full. She had learned something invaluable, that even in hardship, even when it feels like no one notices, doing the right thing mattered. And when life seemed at its most uncertain, sometimes the universe, or a person like Daniel, intervened in the most unexpected ways. As she continued down the glistening streets, Maya felt hope growing inside her, small but persistent. The city was vast and full of challenges, but she no longer felt powerless. She had seen firsthand how one act of kindness could transform not only her day but her outlook on life. She understood now that helping someone, even in a brief moment of rain-soaked struggle, could lead to a chain of events that changed everything. And so she walked on with renewed purpose, ready to face whatever came next, carrying with her the lesson that had quietly reshaped her world. Kindness always returns, often in ways we least expect, and courage in small acts can create miracles. The city glimmered around her, the night alive with possibility. Maya smiled to herself, knowing that she had made a choice that mattered, and that life, in its unpredictable and beautiful way, had rewarded her for it.